with me. So we're ready to go. And greetings to everyone. This is Mark Cole and myself, Ryan, and we're going to spend the next time talking about Mark's heart and life and passion for worship leading. And he's done a lot of teaching and writing and blogging. He's just got a book out that's, is it just released, Mark, in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, just the last 2 weeks, yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
So we're going to spend some time talking about that, and then some very practical tips on improving your worship, taking it to the next level. So let's just go for it, Mark, if you're good. So I think, where I kind of wanted to start was just going back into the good old early days of, when PraiseCharts started back in 1990. Right. And even before then, I don't know if people realize how far back you go with just this heart of bringing great charts to people for worship. And you were a real inspiration to me. I remember in the early days when I would come to your house and just sit in your office and you'd have your little computer kind of all cracked open. This is almost the days before we had email addresses and, all of that. We're just getting into the age of the internet, and you just would let me watch you, put these little notes up on the page, and I was really fascinated by all that you were doing. I'd love to hear just a little bit from you of how you got into, just kind of the forming and improving of your band and writing great charts and expanding your band into, the brass section and wind and strings and all of that. Tell me a little bit about the early days for you like that.
For me, I joined a band when I was 18 and later on became music director of it, where we traveled around the world, and that was like 6 vocalists and a brass section and a rhythm section. So I started writing for those guys and learning about writing for vocals and brass and stuff like that. And then my home church phoned me when I was in my mid-20s, asked me to come back and be the music guy, and they had a pretty extensive music program going already. They had a 100-voice choir and had a 32-piece orchestra, something like that, with strings and French horns and harp and brass and all that kind of stuff. So I was sort of thrown into the middle of it, and I already had a degree, but I never really had done writing for strings. So I used to do tons of transcriptions back then and just listen to the latest, hottest stuff that was happening. And of course, back then, praise and worship we sort of threw together, but we did big things on production numbers and stuff like that. And then of course it changed. It changed in the 90s, where praise and worship became the main thing, and production numbers became lesser and lesser.
Yeah, and then I heard a story about how you actually went down to Saddleback one kind of for a conference, and you were really inspired by what they were doing. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's good. I need a blog about that. Thanks very much. Me. Yeah.
Well,
So I used to go to Big Music California every Easter after election was over, and I used to try to check out all the hot churches in Los Angeles when I was after that on the next weekend. And so I heard this little band, and Saddleback was like 2,000 people at the time, and I went to see their band, and it was just a killer band, killer arrangements. I thought, there's the future. And every once in a while you see something, okay, that's the future. And so I went home and started writing for my brass section and string section at Christian Life Assembly in Langley, and started singing. And then God moved me back to my home church, and then that's all I did was just start writing for the brass section and string section and just worship stuff. And just totally got into it. And that's where we connected through a worship conference.
Yeah. Well, I just want to tell you, Mark, I had Rick Muchow, who's the former worship pastor at Saddleback, and I've done a webinar with him, and I've told him the story about how, you had come out to his worship conference and were so inspired by the music that they were doing, and he's just so encouraged to feel, like he was an inspiration that way. And then another kind of cool thing is very recently we've had Bob Barrett, who was the instrumental orchestra director at Saddleback, and he has hooked up with us at PraiseCharts and is contributing some arranging now. So it's kind of funny how it all comes full circle. And so you've been a great inspiration and, kind of a carrier of the torch of good music, good charts, calling people towards, a place of excellence in their worship ministries. So now let's talk a little bit about your book. If we can look at that, I actually posted a couple of pages here of all the chapters. I mean, this is not a 7-chapter book. This is like, what has it got? Almost 40 chapters. There's tons of stuff. And I'm assuming these are, bite-sized pieces. You could sit down for 10 minutes, take a topic, and just, almost take it as a bit of a devotional type of inspiration for you as a worship leader. So can you just give me a little bit of as we look through some of the chapters, tell me about what you were thinking when you put all these chapters together, and what's the heart and thrust of it?
Well, it's sort of a God thing for me earlier this year, where I've always written a little bit, but not majorly. And all of a sudden, God just put in my heart. Every day I would start writing stories that I've from my travels around the world and from working in churches and all that kind of stuff. And so I started a blog called at markcole.ca, and then I was just writing, remembering God's faithfulness and how He'd been with me through here and supplied my needs. And so, anyways, then I had somebody came to me, an editor who was reading my blog, and just said, I want to put a book out for you, help you put a book out, and I want to do it for free for you. I'll be your editor and put that all together. And I said, oh, it sounds great. So we picked the 40 best chapters that related to praise and worship, and then. So then of course I've been doing worship seminars for years and years, all over the world actually. I was in Singapore for a month recently. I go to Africa quite frequently, in Europe, and I would do worship seminars when I'm over there, of course in North America also. And so I already had all these notes from all that stuff, so I started taking the best stuff that I had learned and tweaked over the years of leading worship for 25 years, and I just started stuff down. So,
do you mind?
Half of the book.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The first half of the book is really music stories of God's faithfulness and how He's worked in my life and how He's shaped and molded me, moved me along. And the second half is more of a practical how-to, and have a great rehearsal, how to pick great songs, how to lead worship in your church and take it to the next level, and sort of a practical how-to. So the first half is God stories, the second half is music stories. How to do it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to look at a couple of chapters here and ask you, give me the summary in maybe a couple of minutes of, my wild dream for God. What's your wild dream for God? Tell me about that.
Well,
Chapter 9.
My wild dream from God. Actually, I was finishing a tour in Southeast Asia, and I was in a band for 9 months. We traveled all over creation, and I was ready to come home. And God came to me in a dream and said, "I want you to go to Poland and join another team." And I sort of argued with God in my dream and just said, "How is this going to happen? I don't have any money. How do I get to Poland?" And God said, "Well, you phone these 3 people and the money will come." And I had that dream on a Tuesday morning, and Friday I was in Poland.
Really?
And in the next 3.5 weeks, we saw 18,000 people come to the Lord in Roman Catholic churches all over Poland with Cardinal Wojtyła, who later became Pope John Paul II. So it actually was a real dream from God.
Yeah.
And supernatural things happen.
Okay, next page. God loves me even when I do dumb things. I don't know why I want to ask you about that, but what's that about?
Oh, when you're in life, sometimes I tell some funny stories in there about I was in London and somebody talked me into buying an Afro wig, and we wore an Afro wig on stage and did stupid stuff, and also about we ministered in a nightclub in Poland and sort of some dumb stuff that I've done. But thanks that God is merciful and overlooks your youthful exuberance and stupid things you do. And as long as you keep your heart right, then God keeps using you. So.
Yeah, that's great. Hanging out with Billy Graham. You actually hung out with him. Tell me about that.
So in 1980 something or other, my home church asked me to come back. I was directing this really large choir and orchestra, and Billy Graham Crusade came to Vancouver. And since I had the largest choir and orchestra in the city, they asked me to be the music chairman of music for the Billy Graham Crusade there. So we got to meet the team and have dinner with them, and George Beverly Shea has now passed away, and just see the inner workings of their team and what a great organization it is. Actually, my wife now works for them with Samaritan's Purse and with the Billy Graham organization. So
wow,
yeah, it was one of those cool privileges. And I was in my late 20s, and I didn't really deserve the honor because I had inherited this great organization. But it was whenever you get to work with world-class people, it really is a great influence in your life.
Yeah. Well, with some of these other pictures that we got from you, I can obviously tell, the whole concept of a grand adventure. Your life kind of parallels this worship ministry, travel in the whole world, having these amazing experiences and amazing stories. And then, in parallel, you're out in nature, up in the mountains. You're like, so tell me a little bit about your passion outside of just the music side of life. You just love the adventure side of life. I mean, you're a bucket list kind of guy. I know I've seen you in your office, and you've got lists, documented. These are things I want to do, and you're checking them off. What are some of the things that you've been checking off on your list and things that you're excited about still doing before you pass on?
Well, hopefully we'll pass on for a while. But, I'm obviously a big hiker. And there's a shot there on the screen now of me being at the top of a mountain in Canmore. And the shot before that was me being in Alaska, hiking in Alaska for 3 or 4 days. So I love doing that stuff. I just did another adventure where I biked. I have a really nice road bike, and I biked from Jasper down to Canmore, which is one of the most beautiful drives in the whole world. So biking and hiking and skiing and all that kind of stuff is really – I love outdoors. I just love being in the forest and the mountains and doing that kind of stuff. It clears your brain out, and it just shows you the majesty and immensity of God and His creation, and so it helps put life in perspective. So, when I'm not doing music, I'm actually playing tennis or hiking or going in the mountains or cross country skiing or something like that. Because I try to do something fun every couple of days. Yeah.
Well, something I know, I remember sitting in your office back in the late 90s and just kind of watching you in your space. And one thing I think about of you, Mark, is you're very intentional about your life. Like life doesn't happen to you. You think about what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. You write it down. You kind of commit yourself to a path, and you're very intentional in that way. Would you say that's kind of how you like? Are you still living your life that way? Just with lists of things that you want to do and how you want to be a better husband and a better man and a better this and how you want to improve and that. So I really admire that about you.
Well, thanks. I am a list guy. So in fact, I think there's a chapter in my book about lists and stuff like that. So I do make lists, and I have a huge bucket list, and there's some really cool things that I've got to do. I was talking about parachuting and bungee cord jumping the other day with somebody on the stuff that I've done on there. But it's both ways. God has always surprised me, moving directions that I never. God's adventures have always been better adventures than my own. God opened up doors for me to travel around the world and do stuff that I never could have imagined. So, in one respect, God has just been opening up doors. In another respect, God gives you the freedom within the areas that you're working to make your own goals and to be happy. I mean, I just have tons of goals I do. So it's both. I have to be very intentional about accomplishing things and having being organized. Administration is one of my spiritual gifts. So I tend to be a really organized guy, but I am also realized that God has better plans for me than myself. So I just try to keep my heart open to whatever He's doing, because it's really cool when he opens up amazing doors that I could never have imagined.
Awesome. Well, let's go into the topic that we wanted to talk about, and this is something you've talked about. I mean, I'm sure to people all over the world in different contexts. You're always, with the heart of how to help other worship teams just get better, be more organized. Think about the right things that should be the right priorities. So all of you who are listening in, I think you're going to find this next, time that we have with Mark to be super practical, encouraging, just saying it like it is kind of thing. So Mark is a guy, he's not like a 25-year-old. I mean, Mark has been in worship ministry for a long time. He's led for, thousands and thousands in stadiums and in small groups, in big and small churches all across the board, and has really developed the craft and the heart of worship leading. So Mark, take us through these 7 tips. You've identified 7 things. The first one, pick great songs. Well, what a great place to start. So why don't you take us there and let's go through these steps and tell us what you're thinking about on this.
Well, picking great songs is one of the most important things you can do when you're leading worship. And everybody thinks they pick great songs, but a lot of times we don't. So of course, with PraiseCharts, when we pick a great song and we write an arrangement for it, it's a great song because then you'll sell, 500 or 1,000 charts of it, kind of like that. So you get a vein when you do that. And so I've gone out of my way to enunciate on the thing about, is the song a singable song? Is the song something that just gets in your heart and won't go away? Do people in your congregation come to you the next week and say, man, I just been singing that song all week? Do you feel like the Spirit of the Lord is resting on that song when you're singing it? All that kind of stuff is really important avenues of understanding what a great song is.
Yeah. Do you think a worship pastor has to work on kind of getting outside of their own personal preference? I want to pick my favorite songs, and sometimes you have to unlock from that and just be aware of the context of the congregation you're leading and, what's going to reach them. It's more than just what songs you love. And yet at the same time, you got to love the songs that you're leading.
Right. It's a combination of both things.
Yeah.
Of course, I've had a chance to, go to Australia and see the Hillsong people. I've had a chance to go to Saddleback and see what's happening there. I've gone to Lakewood Church and see what Joel Osteen's done. I've worked with some of the European songwriters, and in fact, one of the up and coming writers is Ben Canelon, and
right.
And Ben used to be my drummer, so. So I've gotten to know a lot of the people, and I really try to have a world perspective on songs, because great songs are from all over the world, and I try not to just to do Hill songs or just to do Worship Together songs or just to do British songs or my own songs. I try to find the stuff that's really out there and is ministering, and then of course I have my cousin is the CEO of CCLI, and they track all the great songs around the world. So he always has this invaluable list of all this great stuff that's happening, and if you go to Song Select, and now they have a new version of Song Select. There used to be the CCLI Top 100. Now there's a Song Select Top 200, and when you're looking for new songs, some of the songs you go, I've done that song 5 years ago, so it's not interesting to me, but there's always new stuff popping up there that's really well worth looking at. And of course, PraiseCharts keeps a list of new songs that are trending and sort of all that kind of stuff. So I'm always trying to look different places, because it's really hard to find a great song. It's easier now than it ever has been to find new songs, but you have to. They're like little diamonds you have to look for, and listen to a lot of music. I buy all the go on iTunes, buy the new latest album and listen to them and see what's trending on YouTube, see what's trending on PraiseCharts, see what's trending on CCLI, and then my own listening and see what God's speaking to me through. So I'm looking through all those things to find great songs.
Yeah.
And in fact, this last weekend I was working with the Promise Keepers band here in Calgary, and we did. I mean, it was quite hectic because we had to learn 25 songs in one night. But then when we let all these men for the Friday night and all day Saturday, you could really quickly tell which were the great songs that the men were connecting with and which were just B songs and were connecting with people. And so in fact, we talked about it in between our worship sets. We would go back and talk about the songs, and you always got to experiment. Sometimes you think it's an A song until you try it, and you go, okay, this song's not working for whatever reason. And so sometimes there's a little bit of trial and error, but there's less trial and error these days because we have so many great resources to find out what the great songs are.
Yeah. Tell me about a song or two. If I was just to ask you on the spot, pick a few moments, recently in leading worship where you've just had the sense of there's something anointed, with this song in this environment here. What are a couple of songs that you've really experienced that?
Well, I'm a huge Matt Redman fan, and so we did his most well-known song right now, 10,000 Reasons with the men on, and I actually did that Sunday morning when I was leading on Sunday morning also. That song just works. And the first time I heard that song, I didn't think it was an A song. I thought, it's not really, because the initial arrangement didn't have a lot of energy, but then when you do it live and all of a sudden people are just belting it out, you just go, oh my goodness, this is a great song. And then we did another one of his with the band on the Promise Keepers called Holy Jesus You Are, and another that was one I hadn't done before. So for me, it was a new discovery. But when I listened to it, I just sensed God. I just sensed God being in the room when we're singing that song. And I just thought, okay, there's a great song. It probably take a couple times for everybody to learn it, but once they do, and which is the other thing about when we're teaching new songs. When you pick new songs, I have a fairly standardized way I do it. When I have a new song that I think is really going to work, and you can often tell in your rehearsals if the song is going to work or not. And then I make sure I repeat it. You do that Sunday, repeat it the next Sunday for sure, and then take a week off and repeat it the fourth Sunday. And that way the congregation has 3 times to really go at it. And if the congregation hasn't picked it up by then, well, better drop it. Because if they've had 3 times and it's still not happening, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's a whole.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 2, have great rehearsals. We actually spent last week with Corey Alstad here talking a lot about worship rehearsals, but I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are some key tips in your mind about how to have a great worship rehearsal?
Well, for me, the rehearsal starts way before we actually go to the rehearsal, and that's by really communicating clearly with your band and people about the songs. I usually send out, if I'm having, Thursday night is usually my favorite night for a rehearsal because it's close to Sunday. So I would send out an email on a Monday with all the lists of songs, links to YouTube, copies of the charts or links to the charts, and maybe MP3 sometimes, put it in the key that we're doing it in, and then just write with little notes to the lead guitar player, make sure you know this solo for Sunday morning, or piano player, make sure you learn this introduction. And so because I tell my band, I say, you're obviously not paid professionals, but I want to treat you like that. And professionals always come to rehearsal already knowing the music, all ready to go. And so I give them all the tools that they need to be successful before they come to the rehearsal. And if they do their homework, and most of them do, then it really, really works. And so then by the time we come to on the Thursday night, I make sure all the charts are out there, the band, the stage is set up properly, there's good lighting for the rehearsal, it's the right temperature, all those kind of nitty-gritty things. The sound guys are there ready to make sure it happens, so we have a good sound. So we're trying to make the rehearsal as close to the live performance as possible. So everything that we're doing on rehearsal is all stuff that is getting us ready for Sunday morning. And then, and I usually have pretty long rehearsals because I really am a detail guy. So I really go into the songs and make sure the tempos are right and the harmonies are right and the vocal, so that all the vocalists know exactly what I expect of them. So everybody's really confident because if you're really confident from having a good rehearsal, then it really shows up on Sunday morning because then you can get past the music into just worshiping God, which is really the goal. The goal is not just to do good music. The goal is to be able to almost forget about the music and focus on God as we're worshiping Him in the song. So I really stress having a great rehearsal because if you have a great rehearsal, then Sunday morning's easy.
Yeah. We have a few questions coming in during our talk, and so some of them are just related to the things we're talking about. Patty just says, how do you encourage your volunteer worship team members to be committed to the rehearsals? She says, I've been at my current fellowship for almost 17 years, and more recently we we rarely have the whole team present. Their absences are much more frequent than in the past. We don't have folks who can step in. How can you encourage someone in Patty's position?
Yeah. I've learned that setting real strong rules is actually a really good thing. And so basically, if a band member or a singer doesn't show up for rehearsal, they don't play on Sunday. So all my players, whether they're the B players or the A players, or just learning, they all know that if they don't show up for the rehearsal, they won't be involved on Sunday. So if you set that really firm rule, and I just never break that rule, because I have 2.5 teams that I can rotate players. So I can usually find out quite quickly. I can usually get backups really quickly, or even go without an instrument if worst case scenario thing happens. So
yeah,
I really firm on it, but you have to be firm on it, and once you establish that that's the standard, then I didn't have any problems with that. Because the last church I took over, they didn't have rehearsals. I mean, they just threw it together on Sunday morning. It was brutal, and so I just said, that's not so good. So I just came in and said, if you're not there on Thursday night, you don't play, you don't sing, and all of a sudden everybody shows up. And in fact, they say if you're not on time, then you can't be involved with this either. I learned that years ago from a local billionaire, Jim Pattison, who was a great motivator. And you just don't give special privileges to people. You just say everybody's the same. Everybody needs to be rehearsal. We're all responsible. The team is let down if you're not there. So and then that mentality just becomes a part of the philosophy of the ministry, and you just keep going and you build. But sometimes we're afraid to be hard on people, but then the whole team suffers, and I hate for the whole team suffers because one person or two people are slack. So
it is something about when you're a leader. Sometimes you got to make tough calls, and sometimes they're awkward, and you're setting boundaries, but the rest of the team is depending on somebody to set those boundaries and follow through with them. So I think that's good, hard but practical advice. Mike has another question I really wanted to hear you about. He says one of the topics advertised for the webinar was memorizing music. How do you feel about using a music stand on stage during worship?
So I think that usually there's two lines of people. There's the front line, which is basically the leader and however many vocalists you have, and then there's the back line, which is the band, drums, bass, guitars, all that kind of stuff. And I think everybody in the front line should memorize the music, and I mean, different bands do different ways. I allow my band in the back to have music stands with their music on, but I don't allow the people up front, singers and acoustic guitar players, if they're singing at the same time. If you're singing, then you need to have memorized the music. Because what happens is I've seen it over and over again, especially lately, where all of a sudden people haven't done their homework, their eyes are in the music, they're trying to worship God, but they're so busy just trying to follow the chart that they don't do a great job. And if they spent that extra half hour or 40 minutes, because you only learn two songs a month at the most, and if you spend your half hour, an hour learning once every 2 weeks learning that song, you can memorize it and just build up your repertoire. So I think memorization is huge. It's huge. Mm-hmm. I actually hope for a whole blog on memorization because it's so important.
Yeah. Well, I just realized that Mike's question skipped us ahead to, tip number 5. We had a whole point on that, and I just jumped right into it. But I agree with you, Mark. I think it's kind of connected to the whole, rehearsals time, because I think you have to practice to get that song into your heart, into your spirit, get it so that you're thinking in terms of, repeating progressions that are going on in the song, and then, you can start to kind of internalize it, right? Right. So that's part of the process of memorizing it, and then people got to take it home and get those words in their hearts. And imagine you show up on stage and you've got the songs memorized and you don't have music stands and papers flying all over the place, and the stage just looks cleaner and all of that. Yeah. So, I think it's a great way to go, but it takes commitment, and I think it takes leadership too. Somebody's got to lead the band to say we're stepping it up and we're gonna commit to this. So
Yeah, you set a standard and you set a standard and you go for it. I mean, Hillsong actually doesn't allow even the band to have music. Everybody has to memorize the music. And Lakewood Church down in Houston, the band is allowed to read the charts, but the singers up front have to have everything memorized. I sort of go with their philosophy. I think that's a reasonable philosophy to go with.
Yeah. Okay, number 3, work on great sound and media. But I'm not a great sound man is worth his weight in gold, and so so we really work on that as part of our rehearsal. Making sure the monitor levels are working for the sound guys, or if we're using in-ears, whatever the scenario is. So work out all those details ahead of time, so the sound in the room is huge, and then find the right level so that your congregation feels comfortable singing out loud, but not so loud that they can't hear themselves anymore. So finding that right level, maybe that's usually about 93 to 95 dBs, depending on your congregation and how live your room is. I mean, every room is different. So, but that doesn't happen overnight. And working on the room to get the dynamics right and the acoustics right, and working in rehearsals, and then have all the players, make sure they don't run their amps too hot, or putting the drummer in a cage. I'm a big advocate of putting drummers in cages so that you can have good control over that, because some drummers are soft and some will just kill you. So, understanding that whole process, and of course now the trend is to go to everybody have in-ears, so the sound man has total control over everything and that's not a bad thing either. It depends where you are in terms of your budget and be able to do that kind of stuff. Do you think, though, that the idea of great sound is somewhat subjective? That to different people in the congregation, one person's going to feel like that's the great level. I love the bass. It's something making my heart vibrate and all of that. And the next person is like, this is way too loud. I need earplugs. And I'm sure a lot of people must deal with it. It's not just a calculatable kind of thing to have great sound. It's a subjective, personal, almost worship style oriented question of how do you please all the different people in your church. Have you had to deal with that at all? Just different needs?
Every music pastor has to deal with that. I would every week I actually would do a survey among the elders and the pastors and musicians and stuff, and plus some other people that I would pick. I would send out a survey through SurveyMonkey to the most influential 30 people in the church, and they would say how it was sound too loud, was it too soft, and then just finding a consensus, because what happens is you have to get a consensus with your senior pastor on the right level for your congregation, and then if you have the whole team on board, the whole pastoral staff say, this is the volume that we think we want to have in our church. This is the style we want to have in our church, because every church has a different character, different sound levels are appropriate. I went to a special youth event on Monday night, and for me it was a killer sound. It was a really great bottom end. The kick sounded great, the bass sounded great, but that you wouldn't normally run that hot on Sunday morning, because that would just mess up the older element of your crowd. But anyways, your team agrees on a level that they're all happy with, and then you use dB meters, all those kind of things to really try to do a consistent level. And after a while, people just realize that's the level that it's at, and the complaints go down. And of course, part of it is, going back to singing great songs and having your band sound good, so people and having the presence of the Lord in the place. I always found if the presence of God is in the place when you're worshiping, then a little bit having something a little bit too loud doesn't bother any, because God is there, so that sort of covers over everything.
Yeah. I think it's a great suggestion of your survey idea. I mean, we live in an age now when it's so easy to create an online survey, and if you were to pick out 30 or 40 people that you want to hear from, and you invite feedback, on a regular basis, and instead of just like almost cowering on a Monday morning, who's going to email me and blast me with how loud it was, or to be proactive and invite feedback, quote unquote.
Yeah,
it's a good idea.
Yeah, and then people are those, especially those people that get that email, because I send it out. It was free through SurveyMonkey to send a 10-question questionnaire out. So I would talk about everything from sound level to song choice to stage presence to the pastor's sermon, and everything, parking, greeting, all that kind of stuff. And when people know that they're listened to and that you're tweaking things all the time and trying to get better all the time, they're very patient.
Mike is asking, so once a proper instrumental vocal mix is achieved, do you allow your musicians to control their own levels during the song, or does the sound man at the board control everything during the service?
Oh, no, the sound man controls everything. No, because if you allow your musicians to do it, I mean, and that's having a proper stage setup so that, the amps, like I just worked with a guy here at the Promise Keepers band. He actually had he was the lead guitar player, electric guitar player for the group. He put his amp in another room and mic'd it, and he just heard whatever came out from his monitor, so the sound guy had total control over that, because he was running his amp quite hot. If you ran it that hot in the room, it would just drown out the whole band. So you have to have one guy who's ultimately responsible to make sure that your mix is good, and that's why I'm a big proponent of having a drum cage, a totally enclosed drum cage. Put baffles around electric guitar amps, not running the keyboard amp too high or your monitors too high so that it messes up your front of house mix. All those things are essential.
Yeah. Okay, number 4, which is really number 1, but we call it number 4. Put God first. That's really a core fundamental thing, but sometimes can get forgotten in all of the details about song lists and and sound chords and amplifiers and in-ears and all of that. So this is really important. Yeah. Yeah,
and that put God first has a bunch of different levels to it. Put God first in your daily life. I mean, I start every morning reading the Word and spending time in prayer with God, and so God's first in my life every day, and then of course getting past the music into actually worshiping God. In fact, I made a note. I actually wrote a blog recently. Is where's your brain on Sunday mornings? And because sometimes there's so many details happening on Sunday morning. Is the media happening? Is the sound happening? Are all your people there? Are they all singing and playing in tune? Is the mix great? And you get so consumed in all the details that you're forgetting about the main thing, and which is worshiping God. And I made a note in that blog where I said, I've played with Darlene Check a few times, and I've seen her a few times live, and she has amazing abilities just to block out all the complexity of all the music that's happening around her and just focus on God and keep, as a leader, the congregation focused on God. And if you can, and that's huge, but you have to work at it. You have to do your homework. You have to know the song. So you're not thinking about the song. You have to have the lyrics in your brain, the arrangement in your brain, so you know where you're going all the time. And then you know it so well that it just flows out of you, and you can just focus on worshiping God and keep people focused on worshiping on God. And I think she's just a great example of somebody who does that.
She's awesome. We did a webinar with her last year, and it was such an encouraging time. She's so sweet, and she's kind of like a mother of, the world of modern worship, I think. And in some ways is not so much at the center of the limelight anymore, and she's moved out from, the Hillsong kind of world, and not as many people are singing Shout to the Lord and that anymore, but she's such a great woman. I just have a lot of great respect for her. So she's very small, but super powerful, hey?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's great.
Yeah. Well, the number 5 that we had was memorize music, which we did spend a fair bit of time on. I did want to actually make one comment about this, and maybe you can speak on this, Mark, is I really think that what can help in memorizing music is like if you can start to visualize a song, not just from beginning to end, but there's so much repetition that goes on in songs, repetition of chord progressions, and if you for example, if you got a verse that's G A B minor G A B minor G A B minor G A D, if you think in terms of the rhythms of that, you only have to put in your head G, A, B minor, and then repeat, right? I'm just kind of thinking in terms of how to boil a song down into its simpler essence. And so I don't know if there's any other tips, real practical tips on how to memorize. Like what are the ways that you can internalize a song so that you're not just, it's not just rote memory of 101 bars of, chords going all over the place. I think there are skills that you can develop. So,
totally. And I'm a numbers person. I think numbers. So when you say, G, A, B minor seventh, or even if D, a D. So I would think of that as D is 1, A is 5, G is 4, B minor seventh is 6. So I remember this my chord progressions. Then I could change keys if I had to. Right? I actually had to do it with Promise Keepers this weekend, where they all of a sudden change keys on me and going, oh, I guess here we go. But that number system works for me. That's a Nashville numbering system. That is a really convenient for memorizing that. And you're right. I always start with the chorus first because that's what you repeat the most, and learn the basic chord progression for the chorus because it's usually 8 bars long. So you're learning, and it's usually often a repeating progression. So they start with that. Of course, with the lyrics, for memorizing lyrics, we have a projection on the back screen so that the lyrics are always there. So and when we did that, it also made it so much easier. Either having a monitor in the front with the words or a back screen on the back wall that has the words, and that helps you with the words. So memorizing the chord progression, and after a while, you start with the numbering system. After a while, when you get better and better, you start hearing things by ear. You just go, okay, my ear is telling me now it's going to 6. Now it's telling me it's going to 5. Now it's going to 4. Because you hear it and you learn the half play by ear. You sort of half memorize it and half playing it by ear because you're just hearing it going to that next progression. Because music follows really predictable patterns normally.
It does.
And once you get past that, the initial what is the chord progression, and then just spend the time to learn it because it doesn't take that long to do it. I mean, usually the words take a lot longer than the actual chord progressions. So and if you have the words on the wall.
And I think another tip, for memorizing music is the best way to memorize is you have to actually do it. Like you have to turn the music page over and try playing the song and force your brain to think about, what's in your head about where the song is going. If you've always got the music in front of you, you're not going to, memorize it. But eventually you got to turn the page over.
Yeah, well, and it always bugged me that when this summer I would sit and watch a few times. I was out watching more than I was doing anything, and then I would see people. I go, they know that song, but they're insecure and they're afraid to take their eyes off the music, and so you have to get past that insecurity. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but chances are you're going to do it quite really well because you know the song better than you think you do. And if you follow my suggestion of a brand new song in the first week, you repeat it the next week, and you do it again in the fourth week, well, you've done it 3 times and had 3 rehearsals with it, and plus your home rehearsal. After 3 times, it shouldn't be that hard to memorize.
Yep, that's right. Good stuff. Okay, number 6, worship God with all of your heart.
Yeah, and I think it's part of worshiping God with your whole heart is understanding all the actions of worship. Some people grow up in, there's so many different denominations that people are working in and styles of churches and stuff like that. But I think we always need to go back to the Psalms and the examples in the Bible of what worship looks like, in terms of clapping your hands and singing to the Lord and shouting to the Lord and standing. And, there's verses in the Bible that talk about everybody stood and worshiped the Lord. There's verses about dancing before raising your hands and understanding that. And then when you're involved on worship on Sunday mornings, you know the song already, you've put the homework into doing it, so now you can just focus on worshiping God with all your heart and using all the actions of worship as you do that. And that's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Really good. Really good. Okay, number 7, last one. Be a great example to your congregation. There's a picture of, looks like you leading worship. Is that at your last church, or where is that? What team is that with you there?
Yeah, that would be at Eastside. Yeah. And the again, the congregation, because when people come into church, their minds and hearts are all over the place. They might have just had a fight in the car with their kids or their wife. They might have had a great week or a lousy week. Some people, and you just are doing it just because they know they should be at church on Sunday, and all of a sudden they're scattered all over the place. And if also they look at the front of the congregation, they see there's a group of people that know their music really well, are worshiping God with all their heart and soul, mind, and strength, and doing the actions of worship. That motivates them to go, okay, that's where I want to be. And all of a sudden they and this would happen for everybody because everybody's a little bit different. But I find if your whole worship team is up there worshiping God with their whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, that all of a sudden that raises the whole level of the congregation, and they get involved. And if you do that on a weekly basis and a yearly basis, it takes a while to change a congregation from wherever they are to wherever they need to be in terms of worship. But if you do it on a regular basis, they just go, I'm excited about coming. I'm excited about worshiping God and singing with my whole heart and raising my hands and clapping my hands and doing all those things. And you're teaching them. For me, the congregation is my main music group. They're the ones that I'm trying to get to sing. I'm putting songs keys that will work for them. I'm trying to make sure songs that they will love to sing. And we're up on stage, or just facilitating the congregation. We're up there doing a great job musically and then being passionate worshipers so that we can help them to be passionate worshipers. So to be a great example to your congregation is huge.
Really good. Good. A few more questions that are coming in. Jim is asking, we're a traveling worship team and go to many styles of congregation. How do you present new songs to older people? They sometimes seem not receptive to upbeat new songs.
Yeah, that's a tough one. This weekend with Promise Keepers, the leader of the band was trying out some new songs with Promise Keepers, and some of them just totally bombed, and some of them really flew. I think the key is don't start with a new song and don't end with a new song. Put it in the middle somewhere of your set, depending on how fast or slow it is, and so that even if a song's not taken off for whatever reason, or people that it's not working in that congregation, that you end with something that everybody knows. So if you start strong and end strong, then you can have one or two songs in the middle that are fairly new for that congregation, and that just makes it a stronger set. Because you always starting and finishing is huge. Starting strong and finishing strong is huge. So that would be my suggestion. I did that for years, traveling and we weren't. It was before time of praise and worship. We would do worship songs, but you just got to be cognizant. And sometimes you change it up for the crowd that you're playing with. We used to play in high schools. We used to play in nightclubs. We used to play in churches of all different denominations. So we were always mixing up, trying to find the right songs for that congregation. So you have to really work at it.
Yep, that's really good. I'm just thinking too is really good to start and end with things that are right in the pocket, that are familiar and that everybody can engage in. I'm just wondering if maybe sometimes, whether it's from the pulpit or somehow a church has to teach a congregation to have that heart of, hey, we're in this together, and not everything is going to be perfect for everyone, but you have to teach people to open up their reception to things beyond their own preference. I don't know, do you think you can do that from a stage to just help people expand their palette of what they're open to and see that there are 500 people all around them, and let's say there's a 70 and 80-year-old pockets of people, they can will themselves, so to speak, to say, hey, it's not just about me here on Sunday morning. I see all these young people, and I know they need something as well. So that's just a thought that I had is,
Yeah, and it happens at a couple of different levels. I think if you get your senior pastor on board to be the leader,
right,
to be wherever he is sitting in the congregation. Most pastors sit on the front couple of rows these days. But if your senior pastor is sitting on the front row and he's a good worshiper, it's really cute for the whole congregation. That's the standard of the congregation. And then if you look on stage and the worship team is doing the same kind of thing, it's awesome. And then if the pastor can speak on worship so that people understand what the actions of worship are, the attitudes of worship are, that's huge. And then just do it on a consistent basis. If your pastoral team is worshiping the Lord, the team on stage is worshiping the Lord, that's huge. And then also for the older folks, I heard an interesting comment the other day. Basically said, you know, you people have been serving the Lord for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and we know you love the Lord. Now we want your grandkids and your great-grandkids to be passionate about God. And this is the music that serves them. So we're asking you to be patient because we want your grandkids and great-grandkids to love the Lord and be passionate worshipers too. And if they know it's for the kids, you know, when you know it's for your, I got grandkids now. I know it's for my grandkids. You'll do anything for them. So if you give them the right attitude, it really helps them have a good perspective about new music.
Yeah. I remember when I was leading worship in the mid-'90s, I was like 24, 25 years old, still very vulnerable in my own sort of sense of self, and you come up and lead these songs, and I'm wondering, you know, what do people think and how are they responding? But I do remember I had one guy in my church, and he was about 85 years old, and you know, Sunday after Sunday after the service, he would come and wrap me in his arms and just, you know, kind of pour on love and encouragement. And it was so inspiring. And I just kind of, I mean, I doubt that there's very many 70 or 80-year-olds listening to our webinar here, but they have such a, you know, a powerful voice to be an encouragement to the young generation who's carrying, you know, the church and the heart of worship into the future generations. So I just kind of speak from experience of I sought that out and was really, really encouraged by that. So really believe in that.
And decided in your life that you want to be that person when you get to that point.
Yeah.
So when you have a generation leading worship, you're encouraging them and loving them, and you know, because people can be insecure on stage. It's an unfortunate part of sometimes of who we are. So if you can be an encourager. And said, I had the same thing. I had a lady who, the first congregation I led at, she was like, it must have been, I always thought she was like 85, but she lived for another 20 years, so she must have been 65. But she was always such a passionate worshiper. I just said, when I get old, I want to be like her, you know.
Yeah. How old are you, Mark, if I could just ask?
I'm in my mid-50s.
Mid-50s. Because I have a question, like, how does it feel, Mark, to be in your mid-50s and being a worship leader in a world, in a generation where it seems like, you know, so many churches are looking for that 22-year-old hot guy, you know, who can kind of lead them into the modern worship world, and you know, I mean, I don't know, how long do you expect to be leading worship in your church? I'm thinking you don't want to slow down. You love worship and music and helping people sing. How do you deal with growing older as a worship leader?
Well, you know, I've seen constant changes in music styles and music, and you know, I was originally a saxophone player who became a keyboard player who now is a guitar player. So to be relevant in the next generation and relevant with the music that we're doing, you have to keep changing. And I love change. I love new music. I love learning new styles and and new instruments. So that's an important part of it. And then also, you know, and trying to look as relevant in terms of your dress and your style that you can, so you don't look like you're, you know, because some people are 50 years old and they look like they're 70, and some people are 30 and they look like they're 50. So, you know, you just got so you just have to be relevant. Try to be as relevant as possible. You don't have to be trendy, but you have to be relevant to what's happening.
Yeah. And
then to keep your health up, you know, don't get overweight, stay in shape, do all that kind of stuff, so that, you know, people realize that you're. I'm actually really encouraged by some of the rock world. You know, you still see some really like U2. They're still going strong and doing great, and you still see some, you know, great musicians both in the jazz and the rock, and who are just being really relevant, still in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and so. You know, I figure if they can do it, I can do it. You know, but it's a matter of reinventing yourself a little bit, willing to change with the times, and just trying to, just trying to be relevant to that whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking as I'm listening to you that probably most churches they're not necessarily looking for a young person, but they want a person on the stage who looks alive and feels alive and breathes, vitality and energy and health and so I guess as you're growing older, then you need to work at, staying, like you're saying. I mean, look at, traveling all over the world and climbing mountains and things like that. You do that to keep fresh air flowing through your lungs and keep yourself inspired. So that translates on a Sunday morning. And I think that can be an encouragement. And I must say, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't offend you by asking you how old you are, but I just know there's tons of people out there, I'm sure many who are listening, who are like, I'm that guy, and you're right, I need to, maybe I need to do something to just look more alive and feel more alive, and because that translates, it becomes contagious to a church. They pick up on that. So, yeah, I think that's good practical outlook. Well, there's more and more people are asking such great questions, but we are coming to the end of our hour. It's been a great time. I feel like we could just, talk and talk and talk, but let's do this, Mark. Can you give us, close us in prayer and pray for all the people who are listening in and just pray that they'd be encouraged in dealing with some very practical issues that they're kind of going through in their own churches and figuring out how to apply some of these things. Then maybe we'll take a few minutes. I'll just read out a couple more questions, and if people are busy, they can, go on. But we'll try and capture a couple more questions after we close down. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's sure. That's great.
Okay, so why don't you lead us?
Well, Lord, we just thank you that we can get together this morning. Thank you that you're involved in each one of our lives, and you really do have a specific plan for each person listening on the listening to their computer or their phone. Lord, thank you that you want to use them in bigger ways than they ever could imagine, Lord. Lord, help them to be disciplined, help them to be excellent, help them to keep their eyes focused on you, and in all the weird things that sometimes happen in churches, they just know that Jesus is Lord of their life, and they focus on you, because you don't want us to be upset, you don't want us to be uptight, you want us to be successful people who are preaching the gospel and reaching the world for you. So Lord, I just bless them all, Lord. I pour out my blessings on them, Lord. Just use them in mighty ways, again, beyond what they could ever ask or think. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so here's how I'd like to do this in the next few minutes is, people, if you're still listening and you do have a question, let's put it into the chat line just down the side, and Mark and I will watch that, and we'll just try to be responsive. So if you have something that you'd like us to talk about quickly, we totally can do that. And while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, I just want to tell people about this whole webinar. Has been recorded, and we're going to have it online within the next few hours, if not by the end of the day, at PraiseCharts.com/webinar. And I'm going to make sure, Mark, to have a link to where they can get your book and a link to your blog as well. We've got a lot of your blog posts actually right inside PraiseCharts, but also a link to your blog too.
And there's a special discount on the book right now from the because you can get it both on Lulu.com, get the hard copy, and there's a 15% discount on that right now if you use the code word Halloween. This is up to October 31st, and of course it's also on Kindle too, so they can get it on.
Right on. Okay, so a few questions coming in. I'll just read them as I see them. But Michelle says, how do you get your team to be more expressive in their worship, lifting hands and clapping and stuff?
Well, I talk about it all the time. In fact, I talk about it before every service to remind them because people can get distracted so easily. And also, I occasionally will videotape them so they can see themselves, because some people have no idea how good or how bad they look on stage. And once they see themselves once they see themselves in a video, the lights go on, because we watch worship videos all the time, and you see great worship teams on stage, and so then they realize that, okay, I need to pull it up, and then you just talk about it. You just say, on this song we're going to be clapping, this song we're going to raise our hands, this song we're going to be whatever is relevant for that song. I always want you to be a passive worshiper. And then also some people just never get it, and those people I wean off the stage, because I really want people on the stage who are passionate worshipers. Because if you're totally dead on stage and you just can't get past it, well, that probably means you're not supposed to be on stage. So.
Yeah. Bill Mosley asks, how do you teach a new song to your congregation? You actually talked about that a bit, about your kind of 1-2-4 rhythm. That's fairly common. Any other tips specifically about teaching a song? I would teach two new songs a month. I would make sure they're great songs. Make sure they had great rehearsals and the team was totally comfortable with it. Again, we talked about this already. I wouldn't put it first tune or last tune. Never put the new tune beginning or the ending. And then often I would do, when it's a new song, I would do a reprise, because sometimes you do a new song and people are still learning it, and then you do a reprise back to say the bridge and repeat the last two choruses or something like that, so people can have a second kick at the can in the middle of the worship set to do that. So and if you repeat it 3 times in the first month, then people catch on real fast. Yeah, that's really good, practical. Crystal's saying she has a rotation of vocal and instruments. Do you make everyone come to practice, or just those being used that week?
Oh, just those being used that week. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And because if you're not going to be there on Sunday, you would have a hard time. I think Hillsong actually does have everybody come all the time, but no, I just have groups that are on there on Sunday.
So that's there's no rule for that. I was in a church where we all came every week. It certainly helped to build community, but in that church there was services going on all over the place, and different people were scheduled in different places. But you just got to kind of pick your mode and go with that. So both those work. Yeah. Really good. I don't know if you're looking down the site. As soon as I read, then more questions come in, and then I can't keep up. But at the bottom, Glenn says, what do you suggest for multicultural, multiracial congregations?
Well, the last congregation I was music pastor at was really multi-ethnic. Lots of Filipinos, lots of Africans, lots of Caribbeans. So it was really multi-ethnic. Some churches do a gospel song if they're in a real gospel scenario, but everybody in our church really adapted to it, because we were just doing, great new worship songs that we did it, and we did it fairly close to the original arrangements, unless I tweaked it to be more what I wanted to do. So I didn't really take a lot of consideration into the different ethnicity. I ever say that word?
Ethnicities.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, I got it for you.
Thank you. Because you know what? Because the young part of those people, like the young Filipinos and the young Africans and young Caribbeans, they wanted to do the new stuff the way we're doing it. So it wasn't ever an issue.
Yeah. Well, thank you to all of you who have been, I think everyone who's been listening has been a great participant in this, shaping this time together. Really great questions. I always like it when, things get real practical, and some of the questions that people ask just remind me of, it's like people are down, on the ground dealing with just practical people questions and issues that are coming up on Sunday mornings of just how to make their time of worship better. So I hope that you guys feel encouraged by this time, enlightened, and just maybe there's a couple of tips that can come out of this that can help you. Again, just as a reminder, we're going to have this on YouTube. Someone was asking for the PowerPoint, and absolutely, we'll put the PowerPoint as a link up on the site there at PraiseCharts.com/webinar. And anything else, feel free to email us at info@praisecharts.com. And if you have a question specifically for Mark, we'll try to forward that on to him. And so thank you, Mark. Thanks for all that you've done to to be an inspiration to me and to PraiseCharts, and your heart and all of that are greatly appreciated. So that's awesome.
Awesome. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mark, and all the best to you as your book makes its way around the world too. And I hope that lots of people can get their hands on that. So thanks, Mark, and thanks to everyone who has joined us. We will sign off and let you go into your day and week of ministry. Have a great Sunday ahead.
Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye, Mark.